it's my pleasure to introduce an impressive panel of professionals that have been using these products, putting them through their paces, and really pushing them to the absolute limits. To lead this panel, I'd like to bring up Chris Robinson, who's editor-in-chief of Alpha Universe. Let's all welcome Chris and our panel to the stage.
Thanks very much, Neil, and welcome everybody. I'm Chris Robinson, editor of Alpha Universe, and I'm very happy to be here, very excited. And before we begin, I'd like to ask our panel to introduce themselves.
My name is Brooke Shaden. I'm a fine art photographer, and I specialize in self-portraiture with a painterly look.
Hey guys, I'm Brian Smith. I'm a celebrity portrait photographer from Miami Beach.
Hi everyone, my name is Ra Koh, and I've been a professional photographer about 15 years, covering high-end weddings, family portrait, travel, and a Disney show for moms who want to take photos of their kids.
Hey, I'm Chris Burkard. I'm an adventure and landscape photographer based in California, and my travel takes me pretty much around the globe, capturing everything from action sports to catalog shoots and what have you.
And I'm Mark Weir. I'm the technology manager for Sony Digital Imaging.
Great. So I'd like to kick it off. Chris, I'd like to ask you, when you heard about this camera, you did a special project with it. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how the camera worked out for you?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I was like, I'm going to take this thing and just literally run it into the ground. I'm going to put it through the paces, because the truth of the matter is, if the camera can't perform in the conditions that I want to shoot in, then it's not really worth it, to use it. So I knew from using the A9 that it was just an amazing piece of equipment, right? And building upon that body, I was hoping that this autofocus, that the improved burst rate, everything was going to really live up to the expectations. We shot it in sub-zero temperatures. We shot in an open cockpit plane at 12,000 feet, dust storm, everything you can imagine. And we used southern Utah as kind of our backdrop to do this. And it performed, it blew away my expectations. Things that aren't even really mentioned, like just the overall weather sealing of the camera was incredible. The high ISO sensitivity, along with a lot of the features we're going to talk about today.
And so the A7R II has been your real workhorse.
Yeah, I mean, the A7R II is what I pick up when I'm shooting, a wide range of activities. The one kind of time that I've always had just that urge to, bring along an A6500 or an A9 is when I need to shoot action sports and I really need that fast focus. And what ended up happening was, with this, I was like, two things need to perform well. The autofocus can't fail. I'm shooting stuff that sometimes is high risk. When we shot base jumpers in Moab, Utah, and there's literally a moment where if you drop a frame or if something happens, your buffer runs out, that's it. There's not a repeat situation. So I trust these cameras, and the people that we're working with trust the cameras too. So that was a really big deal to see this thing buffer. What is it, 67 frame buffer or 76 frame buffer? It was amazing. I was hammering the shutter down and never even having to worry that it was going to drop focus or anything. The 10 frames a second as well performed beautifully. I was shooting a lot of situations where I had objects moving towards me. The most challenging autofocus situation at maybe 60, 70 miles an hour. And it was just performing really beautifully there.
Opening up to the rest of the panel, we're just talking about the 10 frames per second. And Brian and Mira, both you guys shoot a lot of people. I should rephrase that. Both you guys photograph a lot of people. Yes. And that 10 frames per second, and especially Brian, the mechanical shutter with this camera is going to be important to you.
Yeah, because I usually shoot with strobe, and so the mechanical shutter is important because you can sync it up with ProPhoto Flash. So I did a studio shoot and used ProPhoto Air Remote for Sony along with the ProPhoto D2s, and it functioned flawlessly at 10 frames a second. So portrait photography is really all about capturing the moment, and it kind of lets you capture the moments between the moments, which is pretty cool. Plus, as a portrait photographer, if I get sent out by a sports magazine to photograph an athlete, they typically want not just a portrait, but they want some action in there too. Being able to do both with one camera and being able to shoot it with strobe or existing light is huge.
Yeah.
And a lot of those decisive moments, you know, Mira, you do a lot of weddings and, of course, family photography, where that's going to be a big deal.
Absolutely. I think being able to track a toddler that's running or a bride that is spinning in her dress, you just want to know that that autofocus is tracking with their, not only their face, their eye, the eye AF. And I think what really blew me away was that not only are we shooting 10 frames a second in continuous shooting mode, but every single one of those frames is refocusing. And so when I brought it back into post, and I know we were all talking about this yesterday, how blown away we were, I couldn't believe just how like tack sharp every single little detail blown up big. It's like it's so consistent. And that's the thing. The A7R II, has been my workhorse and I love, but it's sometimes that, continuous shooting mode, it just like starts to stall on you. And this one, the A7R III, I mean, it was ahead of me the whole time, so.
When I was looking at some of the photographs that you had taken with this camera prior to its release, you had a couple of wedding pictures, and then you had a whole lot of families, and there were some baby pictures, which made me think we're using the silent shutter.
Yes, so I did this photo shoot last week in Richmond, Virginia. I was working with a baby and so excited, a little 6-month-old guy. And we started the shoot, and within like the first, 10 minutes, I could tell the baby was getting stressed because of the sound of the shutter. And typically, I don't really want to go to silent shooting mode because of the sacrifices they give, I have to let go of. But the A7R III, we all got this cryptic email that, you guys, there's a camera we want you to try, and it's going to blow your mind, and the silent shooting mode is one of those. And it was amazing. I was able to switch to silent mode, and the baby was able to settle back into mom, to re-engage with that connection, that shoot. And I can't say enough about it. I mean, obviously it's great for weddings with ceremonies, but to be able to not suffer any quality or performance and have the silent mode is amazing.
That was a huge feature for me too. I shot the entire week in silent mode, and it was just a seamless shooting experience. You're more present. You're more there when you're shooting. You're not having to look and less chimping. It's just kind of this like, I don't know, it's a little more, you know what I mean? Like that's one of the coolest aspects about the small, lightweight package of a mirrorless system like this, is that when you can trust the autofocus and you can trust your buffer and you know that the silent shooting is working, it's like you can just focus on being there.
Yeah.
Brooke, I want to ask you about that because he was just mentioning, some of the autofocus capabilities. You do a lot of self-portraiture.
I do.
And that's going to be a big deal for you because it's not like you have someone there.
Right. I shoot completely by myself. So when I go out to take a photo, it's because I want to be alone. So for me, autofocus and the ability to get myself sharp is not only paramount because you need sharp photos, but because the experience for me as an artist is one where I don't want to think about the technique. I want my camera to think about my business for me and do the work so that when I get into post and I create an image, it's going to sell itself. So the autofocus for me is like, it was almost a mind-blowing experience because I often am shooting in manual mode, putting a stool in place or an extra tripod, just trying to get focus and hoping that something works because I'm never in the mood to worry about it. And this was the actual first shoot that I've ever done where I didn't worry about it and it worked. And that was kind of amazing for me.
And a lot of your photos I find to be very moody and very dark. Dynamic range is going to be a big deal.
A super big deal. And the thing is that for a lot of people where maybe you consider yourself more of an artist than a photographer, however you want to put it, there's a sense of wanting to create a painterly image in that you want to build layer upon layer so that you can build your color up, you can build your lighting up over the series of many, many different layers maybe in Photoshop. And that's my process. So I'm creating on average about 100 layers in Photoshop where I'm making it darker and then changing my mind and making it brighter and then changing my mind and making it darker. And I was amazed. I was amazed at how I could make it darker and then change my mind and make it lighter, and it was okay. It all worked out.
Mark, I'd like to ask you, you've seen a lot of camera introductions. I think everybody here knows that your nickname is the Professor.
Are you saying something about my age, Chris? Come on.
Not yet.
Just your experience.
This camera has some really unique capabilities. Can you talk about the pixel shift a little bit and what that is and how it works?
Yeah, obviously a lot of learning that we've had just over the last 2 years has gone into A7R Mark III, and 2 years is pretty much forever in camera development these days. And one of the things that we were able to do is to take the huge performance of the sensor and take it up a notch, really with things that you can really only do with a digital camera. Moving the image sensor by 4 steps in left, right, top, and bottom, and with sub-micron precision to be able to capture 4 raw frames, 170 million pixels, as Neil was mentioning. That way we can eliminate color aliasing, demosaicing algorithms, all the kinds of color inaccuracies that are required by Weir filters that have been that way since the beginning. And we can deliver images of perceptual realism and perceptual resolution that are really quite striking. And it's one of the things that we're particularly proud of in A7R Mark III, because it allows photographers to capture images that really weren't possible before. And that's really the theme of the camera, is to be able to go beyond the limits by using the technology.
And they kind of downsold the sensor. You know, you as a photographer, what happens is we see this, you know, this number, the megapixels, and we think that, oh, if there's not an improvement in megapixels, then they didn't change much. It's totally inaccurate. You know, only now are they fully being able to realize what this sensor can do. I mean, the A7R2 sensor was amazing. Imagine looking through the viewfinder and going into, you know, Lightroom and editing and seeing like a totally new level of color definition. It's incredible. Even looking through the viewfinder, we were all blown away equally, and like we didn't want to say anything because we didn't really know the technical specifications. We were like, this thing is a huge improvement. Color accuracy, pixel definition. I mean, it's really mind-blowing to me. Just being able to, you know, post-process. There's no sacrifice in the shadows or the highlights. Yeah. I'm shooting in super harsh conditions. Almost every day was first light into the sun, end of the day, dark shadows. You have this massive latitude of where you can take your photographs. I can only imagine for your fine artwork, you know, being able to be like, oh, well, I can choose from this massive range. And that's really was such an exciting thing for me to just go into, you know, editing program and be like, I can take this wherever I want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a huge point, because a lot of people, it's like, it's the same 42.4 megapixel sensor, but it's a completely new engine running the car. So it's sort of like taking a street car and turning it into a stock car. Right, exactly. It's, you know, the same thing, but it's not.
Totally.
You know, we had a chance to talk yesterday, all of us, and to a person, every one of you had mentioned that even though this was the same sensor, the image quality was dramatically different from the A7R2. Yeah. And actually, Mark, I'd like to ask you a little bit about how that came about.
Well, that's really the fun part of this, to take the devices and then to take learnings from recent camera introductions, particularly A9, and to put together the different parts of the camera to yield a whole new level of performance, and most importantly, to watch what photographers can do with it. And in the case of A7R Mark III, our team essentially took the camera, and you know, it really looks like an A7R Mark III. It's the same size, the same shape. I mean, it's almost indistinguishable. But just about every part of it is different on the inside, which is hard to grasp. But probably the biggest one was from the sensor on down, the entire imaging pipeline was changed. Not only the circuit design, but also the image processor and even the CPU of the camera, to really extract from the sensor its capabilities that were really camera technology wasn't able to do 2 years ago when we created A7R Mark II. So not only the speed, but also the processing and the using the dynamic range by lowering the noise floor to increase the dynamic range and allowing the processor to really dig through all of the data that's coming off of the sensor to yield image quality that we really had never been able to realize. And then throw on top of that the advances in the focusing system, and then the overall advances in the operability to make a camera that in your hands, it's, oh, well, this is what I've been using for a couple of years, and then to yield that completely new experience, and to hear it from the photographers who have used it is probably the most exciting part for us.
Well, it's intuitive, you know, the joystick, those little features, when the A9 came out, everybody was just like, oh, when is this going to be? And the battery life, all those little things, it makes for that seamless shooting experience. You hold it and you just, everything you need is within this one little area, which is a really great experience when you're in harsh conditions.
Yeah, and that usability, I think, is just a really big deal. And Brian, I know you were shooting a lot with the enhanced IAF.
Right. Yeah, IAF is nothing new for Sony cameras. They've had it for a while. It just keeps getting better. And A9 took it to a new level, and I think actually A7 Mark III takes it a step above that, where the enhanced IAF is absolutely incredible. So one thing I know, there's a lot of converts out there who've come over from the other brands, and they've all been begging for that joystick, which is there, but don't look at just trying to make this camera work like your old DSLR. It can do so much that your DSLR couldn't. And for a portrait shoot, being able to enable IAF, that's really smart. Like, it figures to focus on the near eye, not the back focus on the back eye. And it works incredibly fast now. So I just have it programmed to my focus hold button. So on an FE lens, press that and it enables IAF whenever I want it.
When we were talking yesterday, Mira, you had mentioned that this was really the first professional A7 series camera.
Yeah.
And what were some of the features that made it just feel like that?
So the biggest one for me, obviously dynamic range is huge for my work. I'm in natural light, and so just like Chris was talking about, except with babies and families, I'm using those deep shadows and highlights to accentuate drama. But can I just tell you that I love how big the battery is? Because I don't know about anybody else, but when I was shooting with the A7R II, I, in one shoot, would go through maybe 2 batteries, and it's disruptive. You lose that connection with your subject. You don't want to have to put a new battery in. So for me to do a 2-hour shoot and end this and look and see that I have 88% battery life left, I'm like, okay, now now we're on to something.
Yeah. It was the Achilles heel. The Achilles heel of the A7R II was that battery.
The one thing in the specs that definitely was not right is Sony's being very conservative when they say at 2.2 times the battery life. I shot over 4,000 frames of RAW plus JPEG on a single battery.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever got 2,000 frames on a W battery, so it's a whole lot more than 2.2 times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Brooke, you and I have talked before about how you're kind of a minimalist when it comes to your gear. You're kind of a one camera body and one lens shooter, and that body for you just has to do everything perfectly without really thinking about it. And we're talking about a lot of these usability aspects and how easy they are. How's that working for you?
Yeah, the thing with me is that I don't understand technology. So, we're all up here and I'm like, I kind of get it, I get it, but I don't know the terms that well. And so for me, I need a camera that's going to shoot fast, that's gonna let me get in and out, especially because I only shoot at magic hours. So I only have about a 15-minute window to get my shots done, and I'm usually creating about 3 different images in that time. So I need to go as fast as possible. I also need to know that this camera is going to be able to print as large as I want, because for my business, the larger the print, the more money you get for a print sale. I need to know that if I've underexposed something by accident drastically, which happens every day of my life pretty much, that I can pull it up later and it's going to be okay. So this camera did that, and I was really excited because I don't want to have to think about how am I going to fix this later. I just want to think, how can I make this into whatever I want later instead of fixing it?
Sure. We've been talking about a lot of the still capabilities of the camera, and Chris, you actually shot quite a bit of video.
Yeah, so I paired up with Renan Ozturk, a really talented DP and director who's also a Sony artist and good friend of mine. He's in Utah, and we were kind of just like, hey, let's go out on the road for a couple days and shoot this in some adverse conditions. He's definitely was a fan of this because it was like, let's go in an open cockpit plane at 12,000 feet. And I don't know if you've ever been in an experimental aircraft at 12,000 feet. It's cold, sub-zero. And you're taking a camera that in the past, the A7R II, the A7S, like I said, the Achilles heel has always been the battery. When these cameras get cold, it just zaps them of their energy. And I was shooting all day, sunrise to sunset, still had like 20 to 30% of battery life. Shooting video, shooting stills, mind-blowing. The battery is, yes, it's larger, but it's also just its ability to operate under those conditions. It's not getting that life sap from cold weather. Being able to shoot an S-Log3, amazing. Having totally flat picture profile to then later go and color correct however you want. That was amazing too. Also, one of the cool things that I think some people don't always understand is that when you shoot with a sensor like this, that is 42 megapixels, and it's being super sampled to 4K, I mean, you're packing in so much image quality into 4K. It's like, it's a really incredible thing. The depth and the color recognition that we were seeing, shooting sunset in the desert, you have these really rich, vibrant red rocks, and all the cottonwoods are all yellow right now. Like it was picking up all that with incredible accuracy. It's been an interesting one because I actually, I know we're not talking about this lens, but the 24-105, I used it the whole week. I used it instead of my, my other, 24-70 f2.8s and other lenses I've gone to, because when you need that range and you're sitting there with heavy vibration, this is a short, small package that really does well. And since the A7, I think it was the 2 that came along with the stabilized sensor, that was one of the things for me shooting aerial photography and shooting motion that changed the game. People who haven't shot with a stabilized sensor, they simply don't know that experience. When you're in an open cockpit plane, the vibration is intense. I mean, it'll take your fillings out of your teeth, okay? And being able to put this thing down there, handheld and video as we're moving along at 80, 90 miles an hour was a really incredible experience. I'm excited to share this video too, so yeah.
You were talking about the oversampling, and Mark, I'd like to actually kick this over to you again. Can you explain the oversampling aspect of 4K video with this camera?
Yeah, with still cameras that are shooting video, we have we have higher resolution sensors, and if the sensor read speed's fast enough, and if the processor's fast enough, we can use those extra pixels to create 4K frames, which are only 8 megapixels, of much greater definition and clarity. They're still 8 megapixel frames because 4K is 4K. But if you're starting with 15, 20 million pixels to work with, and you can use all of those pixels, you can create 4K of stunning realism just because you're starting with so much more data. But again, it's processor intensive. I mean, you've got to have the processor and you've got to have the sensor to do it with. And when you put all of that together, it makes a magical combination, like Chris was saying, that dedicated video cameras struggle to do because they're really not designed for that.
Totally. And the lag time, too, in previous cameras has always been a little bit of an issue. If you guys know what it's like to be doing it all yourself, which is not fun to do, going from video to still, to video to still. I mean, I was literally just going from custom function 1, manual, back and forth, shooting and autofocusing that quickly. And it was amazing to set the camera up that way and be able to know that this could do it all. There was no reaching for the A7S for my video camera, reaching for the A9 for the sports camera. It was like no compromise, you know?
And that's another thing that you can do with still cameras, particularly a mirrorless still camera like this. Focusing systems of still cameras are obviously a little bit more involved than dedicated video cameras. And again, you get that tool, all of those advances in autofocus, IAF, all of that is in video as well. And that opens up the opportunity, in a way that's really exciting. Yeah.
Brian, you and Mira both were early converts to Sony. And you've had a lot of time to work with people at Sony and give feedback and everything. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of you guys in this camera. Is that fair to say?
Oh, wow, that's really...
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's a lot of us, but there's a lot of the user community out there. And I've found since day one, Sony is the one camera company that listens to its users. And we had a great opportunity this year at Condo 1.0 to sit down with the engineers. And they're always open to suggestions, but be able to sit down face-to-face and really plead my case for things like USB 3.1 Type-C connection for tethering, sort of stressing all the things we love from A9, like the bigger battery and dual card slots. Please put those in the next camera. And Sony did an amazing job of really listening to that feedback and incorporating a lot of that. And this is nothing new. This is, when people ask me what I love about Sony, it's that connection with the engineers, where my very first experience with Sony was in 2008, 9 years ago this week, when they launched the Artisan program along with the Alpha 900. And the engineer who I worked with there to take the feedback is actually here today. Rocky, you want to stand up and wave to everybody? So Rocky was there, and you're so used to camera companies coming up going, you shot with our new product, how amazing is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still remember his words today because I think this is the direction Sony's always been. He didn't ask for how brilliant it was. He said, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we need to do next? Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that Sony hasn't come up with a ton of ideas that I never thought of, like the possibility of eye autofocus. Mm-hmm. But it's that constant listening to the user to create the camera that meets our needs and then exceeds them in many cases.
And meets them in a quicker amount of time than you would ever imagine.
Yeah.
I could never envision this releasing now. I mean, 6 months ago, I was just having my mind blown by the A9, and now all of a sudden we're here with this, and it's a step in a direction that I never really thought it would happen this quickly. That's a really cool aspect of it.
I think the listening aspect has been the thing that has made me value this partnership so much, because I remember 2007, so 10 years ago, Sony came to me, and my life's work is about empowering women and women photographers, the whole spectrum, and they wanted to work together on how can a camera make better sense for their creativity that comes out of the women, how we perceive technology, and not undermining it or dismissing it in any way, but really valuing that perspective. And so I remember also sitting with Rocky on some of those early versions, and how amazing to sit with the engineers from Japan talk about how can this experience just be easier for the professional, and then the down effect of then it becomes easier for the consumer. To seeing the mirrorless technology, I felt like that was such a game changer for not only the pro, but all the moms out there that want to take photos of their kids. So it's a huge thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to all of you. You can see more from all of the artisans here at alphauniverse.com, and all of you will be here during the event. Please feel free to ask some questions. Thanks again, and with that, I'd like to kick it back to Mike Fasula.